This is a Viva PR podcast.
I was born into PR from the outset with a very agnostic point of view, and then I became an MD for the first time at the ripe old age of 28. There is no experience like managing a business during a downturn. I think leadership is a skill and an acumen we should be cultivating in everyone. The tightest grip really is an open hand. All comms professionals recognise that their roles are changing. I say it all the time to teams I work with. Never forget, fundamentally, what we're dealing with is relationships.
Welcome to PR in the Real World with me, Tony Garner. Today's guest is Sarah Ogden, who's the Chief Client Officer for Europe at global comms agency, the Zeno Group. Sarah spent over 2 decades in agency leadership, and we cover all sorts of stuff like managing people, AI, behavioural science, plus the findings of Zeno's Clarity 2030 research. This is Sarah's story. So, Sarah, thank you so much for. I'm in your manor, aren't I? I think in that London. Sorry about the London building site noise. We flew that in specially. You've been in the industry for 25 years. Midnight, Three Monkeys, Zeno, and the Team Lewis back to Zeno as Chief Client Officer. Let me get this right for Europe. Tell me about the kind of stuff that you've learned over that time about both the industry or managing teams and the things that have been a golden thread through that era.
Okay, gosh, right. Well, started at Midnight, which was a kind of first agency out of work job. I didn't sort of set out to think I wanted to work in PR. I think I had this idea that PR was quite fluffy or something, and I was really sort of interested in quite serious stuff, being like a graduate ready to take on the world as you are. Yeah. But I went to university in Sussex, made the big move from Manchester down south, and was living in Brighton. And it was really at the beginning of the kind of dot-com boom, sort of a couple of years in. And Brighton's a bit of a kind of capital really for digital creative agencies. And there was an agency down there founded by a woman called Caroline Brown called Midnight Communications. And they were absolutely bossing it when it comes to kind of being one of those first movers and shakers in the kind of dot-com space. So started there, and I think that was quite significant because it started my affliction for enjoying working for founder owners, which for anyone who's done that up close and personal knows the challenges that can come with it. But it's incredibly...
Speaking as a founder owner.
Not to offend you, Tony, at all. It's exciting working around founders and their vision and to be involved in agencies in those kind of early fast growth stages. And that was my introduction. But also we were working for .com clients and industries. So, there I was born into, transformation as a kind of normal state of comms. Also, I think started in that kind of culture, in that kind of time. I was born into PR from the outset with a very agnostic point of view on what comms can do and how it can build and grow organisations.
Agnostic?
What I mean by that is when you start in bigger agencies, sometimes you start in a B2B team or a corporate team or a consumer team or political affairs or employee comms. And when you're in a smaller agency, as we all know, often you have to do all of that. Yeah. But also if you're working for very high growth businesses who are super scaling quickly, they also expect all of that. And I think actually when you work with tech businesses or back then, real digital businesses, they understand the value of the integration of all of those things and the need for that. So I didn't sort of start my career as a consumer person or and I think that was foundational.
So a great place to start any career by the sounds of it.
Yeah, it was.
And then you moved on into Three Monkeys.
Yeah, I mean that was a wild time really. Then because that agency had lots of growth because it was an exciting time. Went on to buy agencies, and then we eventually got acquired by an advertising group. And we became the PR arm, and then my role then went into actually integrating all of the different parts of that business, which again was a massive opportunity. And then they did a management buyout, which we were part of, and then I became an MD for the first time at the ripe old age of 28. So that was quite terrifying. And then a few, financial market crashes happened, and things got quite tense, and did my first round of redundancies, which was really, really difficult and tough. But, there is no experience again like managing managing a business during a downturn, it teaches you as much as you probably need in also understanding how to manage a business in growth.
Yeah.
So again, lots of great learning. And then somebody who tried to acquire that business, I was on their radar, and we then started a conversation, and that started my career journey into Three Monkeys, which again was, another amazing founder owner with a fantastic vision, carving away in the market. And I was fortunate enough to join the kind of leadership team there, and off we went. And another 10 years of growth later, and that business was then acquired by Zeno, which is part of DJE, so Edelman's sister agency. And the UK acquisition was a really significant one for Richard Edelman and the team there. And I was fortunate enough to be part of that, and then be on an earn-out period, for the next sort of 4 years with them. And then I got tickled out by a big carrot to do another MD gig, what felt like a bit of a transformation job as well. So that was really exciting. But, I've got to that point in my career where I think, and I guess it comes with sort of being a bit older, wiser maybe. The people that you work for matter more than anything at all. And Barbie Siegel, the CEO of Zeno, is an incredible leader, and her values are right in line with mine. Kindness and ambition. And Zeno was always an amazing agency. So it was a bit of a non-brainer for me when the opportunity came to go back into a sort of different role, and to support the business through where we are now.
That's an amazing trot through what is a glittering career. But in terms of like the people element, what have you learned? I mean, you talked about the difficulty, the challenging time with redundancies, but what makes a good team tick?
I think the irony is here is really good communication. And I think good communication takes different forms. I quite often say to sort of new joiners, even now into the industry, don't forget to be successful in this job. As an individual, you need to be good at communicating yourself. You need to be intuitive and empathetic, and have good EQ, and read the room, and understand your own body language, and understand the written form of communication. Like, these are foundational in our roles and teams, and I think that's key. And I think with that, having a really clear vision for a team, and really articulating and communicating back to that team the different roles and responsibilities and contributions they can make. So I think good communication is absolutely foundational. Sorry if that's a bit obvious. But I think, people join PR because they want to be part of something quite exciting. And I think it is exciting no matter what part of PR you work in. We are moving at the speed of culture, and quite often we need to be ahead of trends for clients, and so it is an industry for the intellectually curious, and the people who are kind of ever ambitious, and that never turns off in them. And I think if you can cultivate that culture in teams, it means they'll all stay with you and hold on for the ride.
Yeah, that word curiosity is one that crops up time and again in these chats on the podcast. That it's a common thing that you need wherever you work.
Yeah, definitely.
You said to me when we were like chatting about this that one of your signs of success is when you're not needed anymore. Can we unpick that a little bit?
I think the word leadership is a funny one, right? It's really loaded, and it's very sort of dated in a way. I think leadership in this world is really interesting. When we think about what it looks like, I think leadership is a skill and an acumen we should be cultivating in everyone, from the person at front of house right the way through to somebody who's responsible for ordering the stationery. I think leadership is a mindset, and it's not a job title.
Right. I
think it's about giving people the confidence to kind of step up and lean in. I think some of the biggest things that I hear from teams at all levels that I know holds them back is people waiting to have just enough of the right information so they can make a contribution. Yeah. Or, I can't possibly speak up in that moment or in that meeting because I haven't read everything. And it's like, you need to realise quite quickly in this industry that you'll never get through the inbox fully. You'll never have read everything. That, we are a moving target. Yeah. And I think, leadership is also a moving target. But I think the cultivation of leadership ambition in everyone in all aspects of the team is also a way to keep everyone leaning in and wanting more.
How do you embed that into people then? How do you give them that sense of ownership and allowing them to because you're also saying there about allowing them to make mistakes, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Safely fail forward, which is I think a Facebook phrase, but I do quite like it, and I think it's right, because we'll probably get on to talking in a little while, but also experimentation is really important. Progress is born on the back of experimentation. But I think, to really answer your question, it's the second C, following on from curiosity, the second C, which is, of course, culture, which is like, how do you cultivate a culture where it's a safe space, but also you give opportunity for people to, make mistakes, but also try things out and have platforms to find their voice, find their confidence. I'm still learning all the time. Right. I think I actually got a really good reminder maybe in my last sort of MD gig about 4 or 5 years ago, where I was like, you know what, I need to not operate on the basis of like, I'm older and wiser and I've got the job title and therefore I know better than you. Because, I think what we've all seen over the past madness of certainly the past 5 years or so, that can be a block. That's effectively bias, right? That's biased decision making. And I think it leaves you closed off to seeing and thinking in different ways. And I think that's absolutely critical. So, I like to make sure I'm talking and engaging and listening and learning to everyone at all levels of a team, not just, operating in a abstract leadership team and they're the only kind of closed box I ever live in. So I think that's important. I think, leadership or, cultivating teams and culture, it's an ongoing learning. It's an ongoing learning. And then I'm constantly rethinking and adapting and trying to listen and learn from all aspects of the organisation. Sometimes the best learnings come from places you least expect. Any
kind of times where you look back now and go, oh, I got that wrong? Or
Sure, definitely. My style of leadership gets stronger probably when I'm more insecure or I'm feeling most threatened. And I think there's a sort of unfortunate twist in that, because they're probably the moments where I need to be at my best as a leader. And I don't think being, too dominant in your style of leadership is a good thing, right? No. So I think that I had a sort of recent experience where just when you're in really challenging cultures where people might be feeling vulnerable or threatened because of the nature of the economic climate around them, or some of the leadership cultures that might surround them, people don't behave greatly in organisations that are very people based. And I think the environment can get quite challenging. And I know some agencies have a reputation for that, and I've been pretty lucky to avoid that mostly. But I think in those environments, you do need to check yourself frequently in terms of your style of leadership, and whether your style of leadership is that you're trying to hold on tighter, or whether or not, as they say, the tightest grip really is an open hand. And I think that's sort of a learning I try and keep.
We had a guest on recently, and they were talking about the context of the conversation was around the kind of AI world and how things are changing. And I was talking about the leadership that's needed now. They were saying it's definitely okay not to know all the answers and to be open about that.
Totally.
And that's probably not the textbook that you and I were looking at.
No, exactly.
A few years ago.
I mean, I'd go as far to say it's dangerous to think we know it, And I think, oh my God, you just reminded me. I don't know if I talked to you about this before, but there was a story just this week I saw about a guy talking to Claude, the AI, talking to Claude particularly, and asking these questions about human judgment. And the answer he got back from Claude was just like mind blowing, in terms of almost like, the AI agent basically teaching the humans a lesson about not over relying on the AI agent. And you're like, God, talk about the circularity of that one, and the irony. But it was really profoundly important, about us over relying on data and looking at things on face value. And I know there's some really interesting memes about Gen AI about how it's a people pleasing, it's the people pleasing AI, and so we all want to be pleased, don't we? So if you've got something reinforcing you and going, oh, you're so clever, well done, I think you're
That's
brilliant.
a great question.
Yeah, thank you. But that's dangerous. That's dangerous. And then if it sort of gives you something back in a verbage that sort of sounds right and sounds good, you're like, oh, I'll take that. We're all time bored. Don't take that. That's great. And there lies your road to disaster, quite frankly. So
yeah,
critical appraisal and
Well, thank you for that. That was fascinating. But we will move on slightly to a piece of work that Zeno has done. You must be really proud of the Clarity 2030 report that was published last month.
Yeah.
Or if you're listening to this in 6 months' time, a few months back, just tell us about Clarity 2030 and what it was and what you set out to achieve. And
one of the things I always love about Zeno is its investment in IP and how important that is into underpinning how it shapes how we all think and the kind of consultancy we give to clients. Business has got a really long legacy of looking at, for example, the micro inner life of humans in terms of how the values that they have and how those values are a precursor to the decisions and behaviours that they make. And that's something that we've invested in for a long time. But Clarity 2030 is somewhat of a build on that because it's really about sort of looking out and up at the macro environment and thinking about the kind of structural changes that are happening in the world and the implications back into really the communications profession and with regards to our client base. So, we're a global business. We operate across 4 corners of the world, really big footprint in the US, APAC, and of course, Europe and UK. And we wanted to look at also the difference, the diversity, where is the disparity growing between what it feels to be a CCO in the US versus a, comms professional in Singapore versus, Surrey. How are these careers, these professions, and the macro challenges shaping those roles? So we did a piece of research that spoke to 1,400 communications professionals, not just the top level, sort of looked at it through different layers of the industry. And really we were sort of asking questions about perspectives of their role and how their role is changing within their organisation. So this is in-house professionals, I should probably add.
Yeah.
So very much a kind of our client universe. And it was fascinating, and I think, one of the kind of core headlines that was clear across all the markets is that all comms professionals recognise that their roles are changing, and that attached to that is a sort of heightened influence within their organisations.
I picked out 72% of comms leaders expect their influence to grow significantly by 2030, but only 29% feel ready.
30% in the UK.
So that's a huge gap, isn't it?
Massive gap.
Any thoughts on what that means and what people can do? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because as well as the kind of survey-based research, we've done a lot of, IDIs, like in-depth interviews. And actually, just this week, we've done another one of our kind of focus roundtable groups with kind of clients and friends around this research and what it means and how they're feeling it, and kind of also getting that kind of extra depth and texture. And I think, generally speaking, everyone reinforces the same thing. It's not just that their influence is changing, but the complexity of their job is changing. The job title list that keeps growing. Just in the dinner last week we were talking about that swing from being specialist to generalist. Suddenly it's out of fashion to be a generalist. It's all about being a specialist, and I think the research really reflects that the expectations are greater, but probably the key thing is it's not just about communications, right? That the role of the in-house communications professional is increasingly about helping the business make decisions, right? Make decisions under pressure, make them quickly and make them right, And I think it's that shift that's really significant in the kind of culture of the pressure that in-house people feel, but also their confidence and feeling kind of ready to react.
How did you feel hearing some of the stories that from the front line from some of these people?
Yeah, it was actually, even though you work with clients across, all sorts of industries and geographies, and, when you sit down and listen to 10 people just do a quick, round call of like their job today, you just sort of go, God, that's a lot. That
Yeah.
is a lot, because it's not just the discipline of what they've got to do. Someone's sitting there saying, oh, well, I've got government affairs and I've got issues, I've got employee comms, I've got, I do the CEO's blog and I do this, and the laundry list of all the different things that their teams are responsible for. But then you go, and we're dealing with geopolitical monitoring, and we've got issues management around, Straits of Hormuz, and then we've got, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And, we're doing workforce transformation around AI, and you just go, wow, guys, seriously, it's extraordinary how you're all getting stretched.
Yeah, and it seems like it's only ever going to get more intense.
Yeah.
Do you see that, or do you think that it's a good time for the industry to kind of like start kind of reassessing what it should be and how it should be viewed by the top line management?
Yeah, I mean, I think the elevation of communications to driving business decision making and being the kind of, the eyes and the ears of an organisation is so important, because I think business in society has never mattered more.
Yeah.
If you look at, other data that I'm sure we're all very familiar with about the role of employees and the role of business in, creating sense of society, creating community, creating purpose, creating, cultivating meaning. And then you think, about what a lot of businesses give back to society. I think the role of business is so important. And I think the value of having communications elevated is really hopeful, because I think, communications is also about kind of keeping it real and keeping the human at the forefront. And it's a good way of reminding everyone that a business at the end of the day is a collective of human beings.
Going back to your little speech with the juniors then, that it's all about communicating.
Yeah. Sort of keeping it real, I think obviously businesses are about function and performance and productivity and all of those more kind of hard-edged truths, and they're really important, but you can't do that at the cost of let's say the softer reality, which is about impact and purpose and giving people meaning and social opportunity and economic opportunity, and businesses are so important in that sense.
When we did our pre-chat to discuss what we were going to talk about, you come out with a cracking line.
Did I?
Yeah, you said that we're in the age of hype.
Oh, did I?
And you mentioned earlier you've got northern roots and you're not shaking them off, even though that you've been.
When I talk to you, the twang just quite involved. You're like talking to my mum, and I could get off the phone saying like, yeah. Right,
But
no,
the age of hype, what do you mean by that? And in terms from, this is a PR podcast. Are we guilty as an industry of maybe?
Oh yeah, 100%. Of course we are. But we've got to sell the future, right? And it's coming out as fast and furious. So, yes, I think we are, and I think marketing more broadly, everything has got more complicated, but is impact any greater? And I think you look at kind of AI and geo and Emperor's New Clothes, not at all in many ways actually, but when you look at kind of geo analysis and you really unpick kind of some of the data when you around AI and the engines and how media is informing it, or LinkedIn or own channels, and how many meetings have I sat in with quite seasoned comms folks, and they're like, God, it's like going back to the future. So what you're telling me is that our own channels really matter, and LinkedIn's really important, and trade media is really important. You're like, yes, yeah. So that's sort of ironic for me, because it's like you've used something as sophisticated as geo and the complexity sometimes of the AI agents, and actually what you end up coming back to is the reality that good solid communications across all channels with robust messaging that's consistent will win the day.
It must be a bit of a relief though.
No, I don't think it's a relief. I don't think it's a relief. But also, I mean, I've talked about this before. Like, I do think probably my core of my style of consultancy and how I operate, I guess, as a kind of team leader or whatever, is pretty unpretentious, and I think, I mean, I'm a complete, geek, an academic nerd, and I'm forever learning and studying, and, sometimes I can definitely lose anyone wants to go off on a trail. I'll try not to do that today. But actually at the core of what I believe, which always drives a lot of everything, is sort of the power of human truths, which I do think are fundamental.
Yeah.
I think it comes back from my kind of being I did history as a kind of degree and as a master's, actually a version of it. And I think, you can study different periods of history in quite a lot of depth and it looks different, but at the core of it is the same fundamental human truths, you know, that always kind of shape society. And I think that's true in what we do.
And do you think we there is a danger that we sometimes lose sight of that or overcomplicate things? And actually, what you're saying is that those simple truths still hold.
Absolutely.
when you do a little bit of digging.
Absolutely, and that's why I think it's also quite useful for anyone coming into the industry to understand or have some basis of understanding of human psychology or behavioural psychology.
Yeah.
Because that's really at the heart of what we do on our best day. It's pure behavioural psychology.
Yeah.
And it's about understanding that and working with that through the different mediums. That's fundamentally what it is. So yeah, I think that's what I quite like to sort of bring it back down to, because you can get lost in clients' messages and
unpick that behavioural psychology bit. How do you embed that with your teams then? Because that's not on the curriculum normally, is it?
No, it's a good point. Well, I mean, like I said, in a multitude of different ways, really. I think we're quite, like I'm sure any great agency, we're sort of focused on the science and the art of everything that we do, and I think, the science gives you the kind of infrastructure to then make the art amazing, right? And science is behavioural psychology, but it's also understanding attention. It's about understanding demographic behaviours, different life stages. That gets you into sociology. It's about it's kind of rich territory. So like I mentioned earlier, Zeno's past focus on the human project, which was all about human values and understanding that, and then looking at those value sets across different demographics, because a Gen Z is going to feel and behave very differently to a millennial in certain contexts and scenarios. So it's really useful to refer back to some of that science, and also I think it keeps you from operating in any danger of bias, right?
Yeah.
Where somebody in a certain situation goes, well, I think it's like this, and you go, well, you would, because you're a 48-year-old mother of two, but actually if you were a 25-year-old, you wouldn't think like that.
While we're on this kind of like world of complexity, the PRCA published a new definition. I'm going to refer to my notes so I get this right. They're calling it a strategic management discipline for interpreting complexity and managing volatility. I guess that's right on some aspects, but when we were talking before, you kind of like, it's okay, but. And what's your thoughts on where they've gone with that?
Well, I think it's bang on the money, and it certainly reflects my lived experience and a lot of the clients that I have the pleasure of working for. But I think it's also illustrates the other point we're talking about, right? Because that's quite a few wonky words in there, right? And I would say if you stripped all that back and went back to the earlier PRCA definition, which isn't wrong, right? This has been updated. The earlier definition was about the management of strategic relationships. And I think I always loved that earlier definition, because I was like, and it's something I say all the time to teams I work with, like, never forget fundamentally what we're dealing with is relationships, and that's what we're in the business of. We're in the business of understanding people, understanding how to relate to them, and understanding how to form a relationship with them. We just happen to do that at scale through the prism of a business or an organisation. But it's core to it, it's foundational to it.
Which goes back into behavioural science as well, because that's all about relationships. Exactly. We're talking as well about AI, and we've touched on AI a few times, but one of the issues that you raised on our call was the idea that there's a duty of legacy.
Oh, yeah.
That there's a threat to that kind of junior level jobs caused by AI, and we've got to kind of grasp that particular nettle. And it's only a new one that's emerging over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But what kind of roles do you see under threat, and what can we do about it?
To do quite a PR response, I'm not going to answer that bit about the jobs at threat, because I don't want to be hung on it, because I don't know. I think everyone's roles are at threat in one form or another.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, if you're in this industry and you're not doing all those things we spoke about earlier, like being ambitious and curious and putting your bias at the door, and, you know, investing time in understanding humans and how they behave and all that kind of stuff, then, you know, you might well be out of a job anyway. So AI is not going to do that for you necessarily. I think the really exciting thing about AI is how it augments our human potential. It has the opportunity to, you know, literally work for us and make us better. A brilliant line I heard in Davos this year from was the CEO of, I'm going to forget. And she made this comment about, you know, AI lifts the floor as well as the ceiling, right? And I love that, which is a sense of like, you know, it's so accessible. Anyone can use it literally, like really within reason, like beyond, you know, we're not asking you to code. You know, it's like literally ask a question in many ways. So, you know, arguably it's much more accessible, and so everyone has the potential to be improved in their thinking and the way that they use it. And I think, you know, it's a tool for us to make us better in many ways. It's not something to replace us. So I sort of hate that notion, you know, that because also jobs have been adapting and changing and evolving forever. You know, I mean, did we not have this conversation less than 10 years ago about robotics? You know, like, and what do we learn? We learn that, yes, it did replace some roles, but also it created lots of new ones. Yeah. You know, and I think that is the reality. So I think what is interesting, going back to the clarity research, is that, you know, obviously AI was a really significant part of people's concerns and their responses. And, you know, the statistics around comms folks on this topic is quite compelling. There's like 69% of comms folks in the UK say that actually now they in organisations are more responsible for driving AI through the organisation than perhaps the IT leaders, you know, and that's just a recognition of how transformational it is. Yeah. Another really interesting statistic, though, is based on that responsibility, only 1 in 5 are using approved AI tools, right? Right. And I think, you know, going back actually full circle to where we were earlier, I think the pressure and the growth of the role of comms folks is growing, but the infrastructure that supports them in that is not. Yeah. And I think that's within organisations, you know, keeping up and supporting is obviously challenging. But also that's the opportunity for agencies, you know, is that we can keep running alongside them, and we can have the tools and we can have that, you know, the infrastructure to enable them to kind of keep pace. But so I thought that was quite interesting.
Pace is an interesting issue in this space, isn't it? Because I can't remember in my long years at the coalface a period of such dramatic change. I mean, I started work using a typewriter, so I've been through some revolutions at work, but this last couple of years there has been real kind of rocket fuel. You know, you go in at one day and the landscape looks like this, and then the following week it's changed, and then the following month it's changed again. And the one thing I've learned is that in 6 months' time it's going to look a great deal different, but I'm not quite sure how yet.
I love this topic. I think you need a whole separate podcast on it, because I think, like, I really like working fast, and I like the speed of the environment that we live in and we work in, and yet I think it's really damaging. You know, I think, and I've only come to realise this really recently. Like, when we lose depth, we lose so many things. You know, I mean, again, this comes back to probably a profound human truth. I mean, there's a reason why meditation is quite a powerful way to operate, is because, you know, stillness and calmness takes you to places and spaces you've never been, and brings you perspectives that are profoundly important and really deeply connected to the reality. And I think when we operate constantly at the surface, at the rate of kind of, you know, the technological world we're in, like we not only lose depth, we lose the ability to cultivate that. You know, we sort of become disconnected, and I think it's unhealthy for the mind, it's unhealthy for the body, it's unhealthy for the world. And I think, you know, that is a byproduct of the culture of productivity, and it's driven by technology, which kind of forces, as we know, this kind of linear, constant feed of never ending, never off. I blame BlackBerry. I'm not joking. Never off, never off. But it is dangerous, and I think we probably all really learn that acutely as we get a bit older, and we've done 20 years of it. I think it's we recognise perhaps the dangers a bit more in that.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, we could do a whole different podcast on that.
Time to kill speed.
But you can't put that genie back in that bottle, can you?
You can't. Although I do think, I don't know. In the same way, I'm getting a bit philosophical now. It is Friday afternoon, Tony. In the same way, nature is a bit of a kind of ecosystem that sort of self-corrects itself. I do think humans are like that too, and I think the best of the humans are like self-correcting and going, okay, right, this has gone too far now. Right, we need some research into this. We need to stop this. There's reasons why Australia's banned social media for 16-year-olds, and it's a serious consideration in this country. We've got the data now, we've got the science in, and this is not an anti-tech social media comment, because I think what I'm talking about is much bigger than just technology. It's sort of a culture we've become used to. But I think there's reasons why, take the younger generations. It's a cliche to say that the alphas and the younger Gen Zs are all obsessed by social media. A lot of them aren't.
Yeah.
And actually there's quite strong movements who say they're anti it. It's probably us lot, our generation, that probably worst at it. In many ways, because we were probably the first in with it. And therefore haven't had that perspective, perhaps.
It's really interesting. We're in this world where we're not quite sure how it's going to be shaped, but we talked earlier in the week about the duty of legacy.
Oh, yeah.
And creating the right environment, or putting the ladder down for that next generation.
Yeah.
Even if we're not quite sure what the world that they're going to be inhabiting in.
No, I think this is a really interesting one. I read something a while ago about legacy and CEOs. The C-suite, gets to a point in their career and they're like, all right, legacy. You need to really think now about what we're leaving behind. And I think, I sort of think about that circularity of everything that we do. And I think, this did come up as well in the context of some recent discussions with sort of CCOs about our clarity research. Actually, most brilliant people get back to the final point being, I'm a bit worried about the younger generations in coming into the industry, because arguably there are fewer jobs.
Yeah.
I know the way I use AI is that I will often use AI to do something I might have asked a junior person to do. And the problem there is, of course, that the junior person, that's their way of learning. That's their way of learning the job. And so I am effectively neutering their exposure to the job. Yeah. And we all are.
I think if you especially couple that with the post-COVID world of hybrid working, where you used to, when we were in the office 5 days a week in the olden days, there was a lot of kind of subliminal learning that people picked up on. Oh, that's how I handle that kind of conversation and so on. And that doesn't happen as much now. So when you take some of the tasks are disappearing and some of that learning experience is gone.
Well, I think, it goes back to some of the previous things we just talked about. I think speed and hyper-productivity culture turns us into transactional operators, right? Transactionally onto the next, tick, tick, tick. And I think you miss the relational piece, and I think you're absolutely right. Even with clients, and I've got a couple of brilliant clients who are like, also totally believe about that's the relationship they want with their client, with their agencies. They want to be in our office, they want to be meeting the juniors, they don't mind them making mistakes. It's not all, and that's brilliant, and that is absolutely critical. So I think you're totally right. And that's why it's so important to try and expose younger employees and teammates to as much as you possibly can.
Making those roles available as well. To come full circle, you talked about your early days at Midnight. What could you take from that you would put into something now that you're doing at Zeno that you're really proud of?
Agencies that are like these kind of cultural diversity, curiosity shops that are quite flat in hierarchy but strong in leadership culture at all levels, I think is key. I think, the energy that you get from founders and leaders who are driven to be dynamic and different, just keeps, the lifeblood of agencies pumping. And I think, that's been true of nearly all of my agency careers. It's definitely true of Zeno. And I think the culture of Zeno in that way is sort of reflected of sort of being the sister agency to Edelman, we are quite different and complementary. And in many ways, Zeno is the challenger brand within that family, and so you have that really exciting kind of culture to it, but also, you are part of one of the world's largest independent comms businesses, so you've got that amazing ambition and opportunity as well. So, I think I'm in quite a sweet spot. I think Zeno's quite a good sweet spot example.
Turning the lens back on yourself, like 25 years in the industry, what does the future hold for you, and what are you excited about when you look into the kind of crystal ball?
I'm excited by probably what I've always done, which is sort of driving forward change and transformation in agencies and what we offer clients, and adapting to what their needs are, and sort of being at the forefront of some of the most exciting things that are happening, that are shaping the world, whether that's, quite frankly, geopolitics, or it's the next kind of TikTok phenomena. I just think that's really exciting. It's where I love to be. And helping businesses, it's a really tough time to be in business, right? I mean, the same true for agency leaders, but it's really tough for clients, and it's incredibly rewarding to be the trusted partner that really helps bring the resources and the thinking and the sort of outside in perspective that can really make a big difference to the kind of decisions that they need to make and the direction that they need to go in. So that'll always keep me awake.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to pause this conversation. I'm sure there'll be another one in the future. Thank you so much for your time. It's so good of you to come in. Thank you, Sarah Ogden.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to PR in the Real World. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could subscribe to the podcast and leave us a quick review. Your support really helps spread the word and reach more marketing and PR professionals just like you. And don't forget to share this podcast with your colleagues or anyone who'd benefit from the insights we share. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for more tips, strategies and real world stories from the PR frontlines.